The attack came without warning on a cold morning 6 months after the wedding. Valera was in her private chambers reviewing trade agreements when Counselor Mira burst through the door. The older woman's face was pale, her scales flushed with fear. "Your Majesty, the Keth have broken the ceasefire. 3 border colonies have gone silent." The Lyra felt her blood turn cold. "Silent? What do you mean silent?" "No communications. No distress signals. Our scout ships found only debris and bodies. The colonies are gone. All of them. Over 2 million people." Within the hour, Valera had assembled her war council in the Great Strategy Chamber. Admirals, generals, and intelligence chiefs filled the room. Their voices raised an argument and accusation at the back of the chamber. Almost invisible in the shadows sat Danny Cole. Valera had invited him as a courtesy. The humans were allies, after all, and he was their representative. She did not expect him to contribute anything. Admiral Tyros, the commander of the Thashan fleet, slammed his fist on the table. "We must respond immediately. Every hour we wait, the Keth advance further into our territory." "With what ships?" General Voss demanded. "Our main fleet is positioned to defend the core worlds. If we move them to the border, we leave ourselves open to attack from behind. The Keth have been planning this for years," Intelligence Chief Nara added grimly. "Their new warlord, Gorak, has united the clans under a single banner. He has resources we did not anticipate." Valera listened to her advisors argue. Each one had valid points. Each one had fears and concerns that could not be dismissed. But no one had solutions. "How many ships do they have in the sector?" she asked. Admiral Tyros consulted his data. "At least 300 capital vessels, Your Majesty. We have perhaps 100 that could respond in time." 3-to-1 odds, Valera said quietly. "And the Keth are not known for their mercy. If we engage directly, we will lose," Tyros admitted. "But if we do not engage, they will continue to advance. They will take world after world until they reach the core systems themselves." The room fell silent. Every option led to disaster. Every path led to death, if I may. The voice was quiet, almost casual. Everyone turned to look at the human in the corner. Danny had risen from his seat. His posture had changed somehow. He stood straighter, his eyes moving across the tactical displays with sharp focus. "The Keth supply lines run through the Narak corridor," he said. "It's the only viable route for ships that size. There are 3 choke points along the corridor, all of them dependent on a single refueling station." He walked to the main display and pointed to a location deep in enemy territory. "Here, coordinates 773 by 429 by 0-8-1. Admiral Tyros stared at him. "How would you know this?" "That information is not in any public database." Danny shrugged. "I read a lot. You read classified Keth military intelligence?" "I read whatever I can get my hands on. Supply chains are interesting to me. Professional curiosity." Valera watched her husband carefully. There was something different about him now. The easygoing gardener had disappeared. In his place stood someone harder, more focused. Someone who looked at a star map and saw things that trained military officers had missed. "Check the coordinates," she ordered. Tyros worked the controls with skeptical hands. The display zoomed in on the location Danny had indicated. A moment later, the Admiral's scales went pale. "There's a station there." Exactly where he said. Our intelligence had it listed as a minor outpost, but the energy readings... He ran calculations quickly. If this station is feeding their entire forward fleet, and we destroyed it, their ships would have approximately 6 days of operational capacity, Danny said calmly. After that, they would have to pull back or risk running dry in hostile space. You would not need to defeat them. You would just need to outlast them. The room erupted in discussion. Officers crowded around the display, running simulations and debating tactics. Hope had entered the chamber for the first time. Valera did not join the discussion. Instead, she walked to where Danny stood at the edge of the group. That was not the observation of someone who reads supply chain reports for fun, she said quietly. Danny's expression flickered. I spent a lot of years studying logistics, Valera. You learn to see patterns. What patterns did you see in a classified Keth military database? He was quiet for a moment. Some patterns are universal. Resources have to flow. Armies have to eat. Ships have to refuel. If you understand how things move, you understand how to stop them from moving. And you just happen to remember the exact coordinates of this station. I have a good memory. She wanted to press further. She wanted to demand the truth. But her admirals were calling for her attention, and there was a war to plan. The raid on the refueling station was launched 3 days later. A small, fast strike force slipped through Keth defenses using routes that Danny had quietly suggested. They hit the station hard and fast, destroying it completely before enemy reinforcements could respond. The effect was immediate. The Keth advance stopped. Their great fleet sat motionless in space, ships running low on fuel and supplies. Warlord Garuk had no choice but to order a retreat. The Thashan Empire had bought itself time out in the celebrations that followed. Danny stayed in the background. He accepted no praise, gave no interviews, made no claims of credit. When anyone asked about his role, he simply said he had made a few suggestions. But Valera could not forget what she had seen in that council chamber. The way his eyes had moved across the tactical displays. The precise, certain way he had spoken about enemy movements and weaknesses. That was not a logistics coordinator. That was something else entirely. She found him that night in his usual place on the balcony, watching the moons rise. You saved millions of lives today, she said, sitting beside him. Your admirals saved millions of lives. I just pointed at a map, Danny. She waited until he looked at her. Who are you, really? The question hung in the air between them. For a long moment, he did not answer. She could see him weighing options, considering responses, deciding how much truth to reveal. I'm your husband, he said finally. I'm a man who wants a quiet life. And I'm someone who will do whatever is necessary to protect the people he cares about. It was not an answer, but it was a promise thought, and somewhere deep in enemy space, Warlord Garuk was planning his revenge. The silver ships came down from the sky on a Tuesday morning. They were beautiful in a way that made people stop and stare. The metal seemed to flow like water, catching the sunlight and throwing it back in colors that had no names. People all around the world watched on their televisions and phones as the ships landed in Geneva, Switzerland. The Volanti had finally come to Earth. For 12,000 years, the Volanti Empire had ruled the stars. They controlled trade routes across hundreds of worlds. They had technology that humans could not even begin to understand. And now, for the first time, they wanted to talk to the small blue planet called Earth. Princess Lyran Velsora stepped off the ship and onto human soil. She was tall and thin, with skin that seemed to glow faintly silver in the light. Her eyes were the color of polished metal, and her hair fell past her shoulders like strands of white silk. By human years, she was 230 years old. By Volanti standards, she was still young. Her father, the High Emperor, had warned her about humans. They were young as a species. They had only been traveling in space for 100 years. They fought among themselves constantly. They were loud and messy and unpredictable. Lyran found all of this very interesting. The United Nations had prepared a grand ceremony for the arrival. Diplomats from every country stood in neat rows, wearing their best suits and their most serious faces. Scientists waited nearby, eager to learn whatever the Volanti might teach them. And standing at attention along both sides of the great hall were soldiers from a dozen different nations. They were there as an honor guard, a show of respect for the alien visitors. Lyron walked slowly through the hall, her attendants following close behind. One of them carried a recording device, saving every moment for the Imperial archives. Another whispered translations of the human languages being spoken around them. A third watched for any signs of danger, though what humans could possibly do to threaten a Volanti princess, no one knew. The human diplomat smiled and bowed. They spoke words of welcome in careful, rehearsed phrases. Lyron nodded politely to each of them. She had seen this kind of thing 100 times on 100 different worlds. It was always the same. The nervous hosts, the stiff formality, the hidden fear behind the friendly faces. She was bored. Then she began to walk past the soldiers. They stood perfectly still. These human warriors. Their uniforms were crisp and clean. Their medals and ribbons caught the light. Each one had been chosen as the best of their nation, the finest examples of human military training and discipline. Lyron barely looked at them. They were all the same to her. Tall ones and short ones. Dark skin and light skin. Men and women standing straight and proud. She had seen soldiers on every world she had ever visited. These were no different. Then she stopped. The soldier in front of her was not special. Anyone looking at him would have seen nothing remarkable. He was average height with brown skin and dark hair cut short. His uniform was the same as all the others. His face showed no expression. He simply stood there, doing his job, waiting for the ceremony to be over. His name tag said Rias. Lyron stared at him for a long moment. Her silver eyes moved across his face, studying every detail. She looked at the way he stood, the way he breathed, the tiny movements of his eyes. Something about him had caught her attention, though she could not explain what it was. Her chief attendant leaned closer. "Your Highness? Is something wrong?" "This one," Lyron said. Her voice was clear and calm. "I beg your pardon?" "This is the human I want." She tilted her head slightly, still watching the soldier. "I will marry him." The great hall went completely silent. Every diplomat, every scientist, every soldier seemed to freeze in place. The translators stopped mid-word. The cameras kept recording, but the people behind them had forgotten to breathe. Danny Reyes, corporal in the United States Marine Corps, kept his eyes forward. His training told him not to move, not to react, not to do anything until he received an order. But inside his chest, his heart was pounding so hard, he thought it might break through his ribs. Had he heard that correctly? Had an alien princess just said she wanted to marry him? The human diplomats began to whisper frantically among themselves. This was not in the plan. This was not supposed to happen. They had prepared for trade negotiations and technology exchanges. They had not prepared for a royal marriage proposal. General Patricia Vance, the senior American military officer present, stepped forward. She was a woman in her 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had served in 3 wars and had negotiated with hostile governments around the world. But she had never faced anything like this. "Your Highness," she said carefully, "I believe there may be some confusion. Our soldiers are here as part of the honor guard. They are not available for marriage." Lyron turned those silver eyes toward the general. "Are you saying he already belongs to someone else?" "No, but then he's available." The princess smiled. It was a strange expression on her alien features. "I have made my choice. This is the human I will marry." Danny finally allowed himself to blink. He had grown up in a small town in New Mexico. His father fixed cars for a living. His mother was a nurse at the local hospital. He had joined the Marines to help pay for college, thinking he might become a history teacher someday. He had never expected to travel further than the next state dot. And now a princess from the stars was pointing at him and talking about marriage. The Volanthi attendants were recording everything. This would be sent back to the Empire within hours. The High Emperor would see it. The Imperial Council would discuss it. The entire galaxy would know that Princess Lyran had chosen a human mate. "This is highly unusual," one of the senior diplomats said. "We need to discuss this through proper channels. There are protocols." "I am aware of your protocols," Lyran interrupted. She had not stopped looking at Danny. "I have read about your customs. Your marriages require consent from both parties." "Very well. I will wait for his answer." She stepped closer to Danny, close enough that he could smell something like flowers and metal. "But I am patient, and I always get what I want." She turned and walked away, her attendants hurrying to keep up. Danny stood there, still at attention, as the world fell apart around him. Diplomats were shouting. Officers were making phone calls. Somewhere, a journalist was already writing the headline that would change everything. The alien princess had chosen him. Danny had no idea why. Danny sat alone in a small room at the United Nations building. The walls were white. The chair was uncomfortable. A glass of water sat on the table in front of him, but he had not touched it. He had been sitting there for 3 hours, waiting for someone to tell him what was happening. The door opened, and General Vance walked in. She looked tired. There were new lines on her face that had not been there that morning. "Corporal Reyes," she said, sitting down across from him. "How are you holding up?" "I don't know, ma'am," Danny said honestly. "I'm not sure what's happening." The general sighed. "Neither are we. But I need you to understand something. You can refuse this. The Volanthi have agreed that human customs apply here. If you don't want to marry their princess, you can say no." Danny nodded slowly. "But there's a but, isn't there?" "There's always a but." The general leaned forward. "The Volanthi control most of the known galaxy. They have ships that could destroy our entire planet in a day. They have medicine that could cure every disease we've ever known. They have technology that would take us 1,000 years to develop on our own." She paused. "And their princess has decided she wants you. Why?" Danny asked. It was the question that had been spinning in his head since the moment Lyran had pointed at him. "Why me? I'm nobody. I'm just a corporal from New Mexico. That's what we'd like to know." The general stood up. "The princess has agreed to meet with you. 3 meetings," she said. "After that, you have to give her an answer." She walked to the door. "Whatever you decide, Corporal, your country will support you. But I hope you understand how much is riding on this." She left, and Danny was alone again. The first meeting happened the next day. They gave Danny new clothes to wear. Not his uniform, but a simple dark suit. They told him how to address the princess, how to bow, what words to use. He forgot most of it the moment he walked into the room. Lyran was sitting in a chair that looked like it was made of light. She wore a flowing gown that changed colors as she moved. Her silver eyes locked onto Danny the moment he entered. "Sit," she said, pointing to a chair across from her. "We have much to discuss." Danny sat. His hands were sweating. He wiped them on his pants and hoped she hadn't noticed. "Tell me about your childhood," Lyran said. That wasn't what Danny had expected. "My childhood?" "Yes. Where did you grow up? What did you eat? What books did you read? What games did you play?" She leaned forward slightly. "I want to know everything." So Danny told her. He talked about the small town where he had grown up, where everyone knew everyone and nothing exciting ever happened. He talked about his mother's cooking, the way she made tamales every Christmas. He talked about his father teaching him to fix engines in their garage on Saturday mornings. He talked about playing baseball with his friends, about reading comic books under his blanket at night, about dreaming of adventures in faraway places. Lyran listened to every word. She asked questions, lots of questions. She wanted to know what a tamale tasted like. She wanted to know the rules of baseball. She wanted to know why humans read stories about things that never happened. When the meeting ended, Danny realized he had been talking for 4 hours. The second meeting was different. "Tell me about death," Lyron said. Danny blinked. "Death?" "Human death. You live such short lives. 80 years, perhaps 90 if you are lucky. That is nothing to us. A Volanthe can live for 1,000 years. Her silver eyes studied him. "How do you handle it? Knowing that everyone you love will die? Knowing that you yourself will die?" Danny thought about it for a long time before answering. "We don't really handle it," he admitted. "We just live with it. We know it's coming, so we try to make the time we have matter. We tell people we love them. We try to leave something behind. A family, a legacy, something that will last after we're gone. And when someone dies, when you lose them..." Danny thought about his grandmother, who had passed away when he was 15. He thought about the funeral, the tears, the way his mother had held on to his father like she might fall apart. "It hurts," he said quietly. "It hurts more than anything. But we get through it. We remember the people we lost. We carry them with us. And eventually, the pain gets smaller. Not gone, but smaller." Lyron was quiet for a long time after that. The third meeting was the most important. "One last question," Lyron said. "What would you die for?" Danny didn't hesitate. "My family. My friends. My planet, I guess, if it came to that. You guess? I've never had to find out. I hope I never do. But yeah, if something threatened the people I care about, I'd do whatever I had to do to protect them." Lyron smiled. It was the first time Danny had seen her smile, and it changed her whole face. She looked almost human in that moment. "That's why I chose you," she said. "I still don't understand." "No, but you will." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the human city below. "My empire is old, Danny Reyes. We have lived for 12,000 years. We have conquered worlds, built wonders, achieved things your species cannot imagine. But somewhere along the way, we forgot what it means to risk. We forgot what it means to love something so much that you would die for it." She turned back to face him. "Humans are chaos," she continued. "You are messy and emotional and unpredictable. You live short lives and burn bright, and then you are gone. But in that brief time, you feel things that my people have forgotten how to feel. You love fiercely. You fight desperately. You hope wildly." Danny listened, trying to understand. "I could have chosen any human," Lyron said. "A general with medals on his chest. A scientist with knowledge in his head. A leader with power in his hands. But I wanted someone who still knew how to wonder. Someone who hadn't yet decided who he was going to be." She walked closer to him, close enough to touch. "You're still becoming, Danny Reyes. You don't know yet what you're capable of." "Neither do I." Her silver eyes were bright. "I want to find out together." Danny swallowed hard. His heart was pounding again, but it felt different this time. Less like fear, more like something he couldn't name. "And if I say yes?" he asked. "Then we will change the galaxy," Lyron said simply. "Together." Danny thought about his small town, his parents, his dreams of teaching history. Then he thought about the stars. "Okay," he said. "Let's find out." The news spread across the galaxy like fire. On 1,000 worlds, people talked about the human soldier who had captured a Volanthe princess. Some thought it was romantic. Some thought it was disgusting. Some thought it was the beginning of something new. And some thought it was a mistake that needed to be corrected. Ambassador Keth had served the Volanthe Empire for 300 years. He had negotiated treaties with warrior species. He had brought rebellious worlds back under Imperial control. He had never once failed a mission. And he had not come to Earth to watch a princess throw her life away on a primitive. "This cannot be allowed," he said into the secure communication device. The signal traveled across thousands of light years to the Imperial Council chambers. "The princess has lost her mind. Humans are useful tools, nothing more. They are not our equals. This marriage would elevate them beyond their station." The council members listened. Some agreed with him. They saw humans as children playing with toys they did not understand. They saw the marriage as an insult to Volanthi blood and Volanthi honor, but others saw opportunity. A human prince would be easy to control, one counselor argued. "We could use him to bind Earth to the Empire, make them dependent on us. By the time they realize what has happened, it will be too late." The debate went on for days. But in the end, it did not matter what the council decided, because Crown Prince Severon Valsora had already made his own choice. The prince arrived on Earth 3 weeks after his sister's announcement. He came with 12 warships, massive vessels of silver and gold that blocked out the sun as they descended through the atmosphere. He said they were just his standard escort. No one believed him. Severin was everything his sister was not. Where Lyran was curious and open, Severin was cold and proud. Where she looked at humans with interest, he looked at them with barely hidden contempt. He was 800 years old, the heir to the greatest empire in known space. And he did not like what his sister had done. The meeting took place in the same United Nations building where Lyran had first seen Danny. But this time, there were soldiers everywhere. Human soldiers with guns that seemed like toys next to Volanthi weapons. Volanthi guards with armor that could stop anything humans could throw at them. Danny stood beside Lyran, wearing the formal clothes of a Volanthi noble. He felt ridiculous in them, but she had insisted. This was a battle, she had told him. And in battle, you wore your armor. Severin walked into the room like he owned it. Like he owned the whole planet. His silver eyes swept across the assembled humans with obvious disdain before settling on Danny. "So," the prince said, "this is the creature my sister has chosen." Danny felt Lyran tense beside him. But he kept his face calm. He had dealt with bullies before. Severin was just a bigger one. "Creature is a strong word," Danny said. "I prefer human. Or you could just call me Danny." Something flickered in Severin's eyes. Surprise, maybe. He had not expected the human to talk back. "You do not know your place," the prince said. "Maybe not, but I know where I'm standing." General Vance stepped forward before things could escalate further. "Your Highness, we are honored by your visit. Perhaps we could discuss the purpose of your—" "The purpose is simple," Severin interrupted. He turned his gaze back to Danny. "I am here to give this human a choice. He will withdraw his agreement to marry my sister. He will return to whatever insignificant life he came from. And this foolish mistake will be forgotten. And if I don't?" Danny asked. Severin smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Then I will destroy this planet. Every city, every person, every memory of humanity will be erased from the galaxy." He said it calmly, like he was discussing the weather. "My ships can reduce your world to dust in a matter of hours. There would be nothing left." The room went cold. Danny felt fear rising in his chest. Real fear, the kind that made his hands shake and his stomach twist. Severin was not bluffing. Danny could see it in those silver eyes. The prince would do exactly what he said, but something else was rising too. Something that felt like anger, like defiance, like the stubborn pride that had gotten Danny in trouble more times than he could count. He thought about his parents, his sister, his friends, all of them erased from existence because some ancient alien prince couldn't handle his sister making her own choice. "You think we fear you?" General Vance demanded. Her voice was steady despite the threat. "I think you should," Severin replied coolly. "We have conquered species far more advanced than yours. We would barely notice your passing." Danny stepped forward. Every protocol, every rule of diplomacy told him to stay quiet. But he couldn't. He wouldn't. "Your empire is dying," Danny said. The room went silent. Severin stared at him. "What did you say?" "I've been learning," Danny continued. His voice was shaking, but he kept talking. "Your sister has been teaching me about your history. 12,000 years of rule. Hundreds of worlds under your control. The greatest empire ever known." He paused. "And it's rotting from the inside." Severin's hand moved toward his weapon. Guards on both sides raised their own. "You're not dying from invasion or disease," Danny said. "You're dying from boredom, from fear. You've become so scared of losing anything that you've forgotten how to live. Your people don't create anymore. They don't dream. They just exist, year after year, century after century, waiting for nothing." "You know nothing of my people," Severin hissed. "I know your sister chose a human, not a Volanthi noble, not a warrior from a respected species. A human, a primitive from a backwater world." Danny met the prince's gaze without flinching. "That's why you're really here, isn't it? That's what really scares you." "I fear nothing." "You fear change." Danny took another step forward. The guards were shouting now, but he ignored them. "You fear that if this works, then everything you believe about the natural order of the galaxy is wrong. You fear that maybe your empire doesn't have all the answers. That maybe you need us as much as we need you." Severin's hand closed on his weapon. Danny didn't move. For a long moment, no one breathed. The fate of an entire world hung on what happened next. Then Severin laughed. It was a harsh sound, cold and bitter. But there was something else in it, too. Something that might have been respect. "You're right to be afraid of us, human," the prince said. "We could destroy you without effort. We could end your species with a thought." He let go of his weapon. "But I'm beginning to understand why my sister finds you interesting." He turned toward the door. "The wedding will proceed," he said without looking back. "I will not interfere. But know this, Danny Rays of Earth, I will be watching. And if you disappoint me, if you prove to be less than my sister believes, there will be no second chances." He walked out, his guards following. The room seemed to breathe again. Danny realized his legs were shaking. He had just faced down an alien prince who could destroy worlds. He had gambled with the lives of every human on Earth, and somehow he had won. Viren's hand found his. Her fingers were cool against his skin. "I told you," she said softly. "You don't know yet what you're capable of." Danny looked at her silver eyes and strange smile, at the future that waited for them both. "I'm starting to find out," he said. 5 years passed. In the great timeline of the Volanthi Empire, 5 years was nothing. A blink of an eye. A single breath in a life that spanned millennia. But for Danny Reyes, those 5 years changed everything. He learned to speak the Volanthi language without a translator. He learned their history, their customs, their art. He learned which nobles could be trusted and which ones smiled while planning betrayal. He learned to walk through crystal halls with his head held high, even when whispers followed him like shadows. And slowly, impossibly, he began to change them too. It started small. A Volanthi scientist asked Danny about human music, and Danny spent an afternoon teaching her to play guitar. A young noble wanted to understand why humans cried at sad stories, and Danny gave him a book of poems that made him weep for the first time in 300 years. A warrior asked what it felt like to know you might die in battle, and Danny told her about the human soldiers who charged into danger, knowing they might not come back. Little by little, humans began to arrive on Volanthi Prime, not as visitors or tourists, but as partners. Human artists worked beside Volanti masters. Human engineers brought new ideas to ancient problems. Human doctors and nurses taught the Volanti about care and compassion, about holding someone's hand when medicine wasn't enough. And everywhere they went, humans brought their chaos. They laughed too loud and cried too easily. They fell in love at first sight and fought over small things. They made mistakes and apologized and tried again. They lived fast and burned bright and refused to be quiet about any of it. The Volanti didn't know what to do with them. Some were annoyed. Some were disgusted. But many, more than anyone expected, were fascinated. These short-lived creatures from a backwater world had something the Empire had lost. Something precious. Something real. They had passion. Danny and Lyran had 3 children. The first was a daughter named Myra. She had her mother's silver eyes and her father's stubborn determination. By the time she was 5, she was asking questions that made philosophers uncomfortable. The second was a son named Carlos, named after Danny's grandfather. He had brown hair like his father and the Volanti gift for music. He could make instruments sing in ways that made people forget to breathe. The third was another daughter, Lucia. She was quiet and thoughtful, always watching, always thinking. She saw patterns in things that others missed. The scholars said she would change the galaxy someday. Danny believed them. The children were strange and wonderful, a blend of 2 worlds that had never been blended before. They grew up speaking 2 languages, following 2 sets of traditions belonging to 2 species. They were something new, something that had never existed before. And they were not alone. Other marriages followed. Other unions between humans and Volanti, between humans and species from distant worlds. The barriers that had seemed so solid began to crack. The rules that everyone had accepted for thousands of years began to change. Ambassador Keth Varishan came to Danny on a quiet evening, 20 years after the wedding. The old diplomat looked tired. The arguments he had made against the marriage seemed foolish now, even to him. "I was wrong," he said simply. It had taken him 20 years to say those words. But he said them. Danny nodded. "What changed your mind?" "Your daughter, Mira," the ambassador said. "I watched her debate the Grand Council last month. She is 11 years old, and she made fools of beings who have lived for centuries." He shook his head slowly. "She's not Volanti. She's not human. She is something else. Something better. She's just a kid," Danny said. "She's my kid. She is the future." The ambassador looked at Danny with something like wonder. "You were the future too. I was just too blind to see it." Crown Prince Severin became one of Danny's closest allies, though they never quite became friends. Some distances were too great to fully bridge. But when threats arose against the Empire, when old enemies tested their strength, Severin and Danny stood together. The Prince of Ancient Blood and the Prince from New Mexico. Tradition and change. Ice and fire. It worked, somehow. On Earth, in a small town in New Mexico. Danny's parents grew old surrounded by wonders they never could have imagined. Their grandchildren visited when they could, traveling across the stars to eat Elena's cooking and listen to Miguel's stories. The whole town came out to see them. The alien princess and the human soldier, home where it all began. He always was a dreamer, Elena would tell anyone who asked. She kept pictures of Danny and Lyran on every surface of her house. "I just didn't know the universe was listening." Miguel would laugh and shake his head. "The universe didn't listen," he would say. "Danny made it listen. That's what humans do." Years became decades. Decades became a century. The historians would call it the human integration. They would write books about it, study it, debate its causes and effects. They would talk about trade agreements and technology transfers and diplomatic achievements. They would analyze charts and graphs and data. But those who had been there knew the truth was simpler. A princess had looked at a soldier and seen potential. A soldier had looked at a princess and seen possibility. They had bet everything on a chance, on a hope, on a feeling that couldn't be measured or explained. And they had won. Danny Reyes lived to be 93 years old. By human standards, a good long life. By Volante standards, barely a heartbeat. On the day he died, Lyran sat beside him, holding his hand like she had held it on their wedding day. "Are you scared?" she asked, the same question she had asked on their first night together. "Terrified," Danny said. His voice was weak now, but his eyes still sparkled. "But you know what they say. The best adventures always start with fear." He died with a smile on his face, surrounded by his children and grandchildren, surrounded by the family he had built across the stars. Lyran mourned him for 50 years. Volante's grief was long and deep, but she did not regret her choice. She never regretted it for a single moment, because Danny Reyes, the corporal from New Mexico, had shown the galaxy what it meant to be human. He had shown them that short lives could matter, that ordinary people could change the universe, that love and hope and stubborn courage were worth more than all the power in the stars. And the galaxy remembered. On 100 worlds, they told the story of the soldier and the princess. They told it to their children and their children's children. They added details and changed names and made it more beautiful with every telling. But the heart of the story stayed the same. She chose him from all the soldiers. "This is the human I want," she said. "I will marry him." And together, they reminded an ancient empire what it meant to hope. The galaxy was never quite the same, but then again, it wasn't supposed to be.